The day the carousel stopped spinning, I found a stranger's glove tangled in its gears, and it smelled like my wife's perfume. It was a quiet afternoon at the carnival, the kind where the off-season chill draped itself over our small coastal town like a shroud. The crowds were gone, leaving only the creak of rusting rides and the distant, restless crash of waves against the shore. I'd been called in to fix the carousel. Its motor had seized up again, a stubborn old beast that broke down every few months like it was begging to be put out of its misery. I didn't mind. Fixing broken things was what I did best. At least, it used to be. My name's Ethan. I'm a mechanic by trade, the guy who keeps the carnival's relics limping along: clocks, rides, anything with gears and a heartbeat. I'm 36, with hands roughened by years of wrench turning and a mop of dark hair that's starting to gray at the edges. I've lived in this town my whole life, in a weathered Victorian house at the edge of the cliffs with my wife, Mara. She's an artist, the kind who sees beauty in chaos, her days spent painting storms and seascapes while I wrestle order out of machines. We've been married 8 years, and for most of them, we fit together like cogs in a well-oiled clock. Lately, though, there's been a hitch in the rhythm: silences that stretch too long, glances that don't quite connect. That afternoon, I was crouched beside the carousel's central mechanism, my hands moving on autopilot, tightening bolts, oiling joints, coaxing life back into the beast. That's when I saw it, a black leather glove, wedged between two gears like it had been caught mid-rotation. I tugged it free, frowning. It wasn't mine, and it didn't belong to any of the carnival crew I knew. The leather was soft, well-worn, a man's size. I turned it over, and that's when the scent hit me: jasmine and amber, faint but unmistakable. Mara's perfume. The one she dabbed on her wrists every morning before disappearing into her studio. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing, maybe she dropped it while passing by, or picked it up somewhere and it ended up here. But that didn't hold water. Mara hadn't been to the carnival in weeks, not since she started her latest series of paintings, the one she said needed the solitude of night to capture. She'd been distant lately, her mind drifting even when she was right beside me, her laughter a little too quick, her eyes avoiding mine. I'd chalked it up to her art, to the moods that came with it. But now, holding that glove, doubt crept in like salt air through a cracked window. I stuffed it into my coat pocket and finished the repair, the carousel groaning back to life with a shudder. The horses bobbed up and down, their painted eyes staring blankly into the fog. I should have gone home then, but the glove felt heavy against my chest, a question I couldn't ignore. When I finally walked through the fog-draped streets to our house, the unease had settled in deep. The place was quiet when I stepped inside, the only sound the ticking of a dozen clocks I'd restored over the years, each one slightly out of sync. "Mara?" I called, hanging my coat by the door. No answer. I climbed the stairs to her studio, a chaos of half-finished canvases, scattered brushes, and the sharp smell of turpentine. It was empty. Her easel stood draped with a cloth, a half-painted carnival scene peeking out, bright colors clashing against a dark sky. Her phone was gone from her desk. She never left without it. A knot tightened in my chest. I texted her, "Where are you?" No reply. I sank into the chair by her desk, pulling the glove from my pocket. The scent was still there, jasmine and amber, but now I caught something else: cigarette smoke, faint but sharp. Mara didn't smoke. She hated it, always had. My grip tightened on the leather. This wasn't her glove. It belonged to someone else, someone who'd been close enough to leave her perfume on it. I stood, pacing the room, my mind spinning like a carousel off its axis. The late nights she'd been keeping, the secretive phone calls she brushed off as gallery business, the way she'd started locking her studio door, it all crashed together now, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to see. I wasn't the jealous type, never had been. Mara and I had built our life on trust, on the quiet certainty that we were each other's anchor. But that trust was fraying, and the glove was the first thread to snap. I glanced at the clock, a vintage piece I'd fixed last year. Nearly 8. Mara was usually home by 7, her hands stained with paint, her smile tired but warm. Tonight, the house felt hollow without her. I studied the glove again under the lamplight. A tiny tear near the wrist caught my eye, and then I saw it, a small embroidered initial, almost invisible against the dark leather. T. T for who?
I racked my brain. A gallery owner? An artist friend? No name fit. The unease deepened into something colder, sharper.
I needed to find her, to ask her about the glove, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. Mara hated when I overthought things, when I let my mind spiral. But this wasn't a spiral. It was real leather and scent and an initial that didn't belong. I grabbed my keys and headed back to the carnival, the fog thickening around me like a shroud. The rides loomed in the distance, skeletal and silent. I made for the carousel, hoping to find her there, painting the night scene she'd been obsessed with lately. But the platform was deserted, the horses frozen mid-gallop. Then I saw it, a flash of red near the control booth. Mara's scarf, bright and unmistakable, draped over the lever. My heart thudded. She'd been here. I picked it up, the fabric soft and familiar, and something fell from its folds, a small, ornate key, glinting in the dim light. I turned it over in my palm. It wasn't a house key or a car key. It looked older, like it belonged to a lockbox or an antique chest. Suspicion prickled down my spine. Mara didn't own anything that needed a key like this. At least, not that I knew of. I pocketed it alongside the glove, scanning the shadows for any other sign of her. That's when I noticed the photo booth in the corner, its curtain half drawn. I'd restored it last summer, a clunky old thing that spat out black and white strips for a quarter. Something pulled me toward it. I stepped closer and pulled back the curtain. A strip of photos lay on the seat, forgotten. I picked it up, and my breath caught. There was Mara laughing, her head thrown back, her arm around a man I didn't know. In the next frame, they were closer, his hand on her cheek, their faces inches apart. In the last, they were kissing, lost in each other, oblivious to the camera. My hand shook as I stared at the images, anger and disbelief crashing through me. The man was tall, sharp-featured, his eyes locked on Mara with an intensity that turned my stomach. I crumpled the strip in my fist, my vision blurring. This couldn't be real. Not Mara. Not us. But it was. And as I stood there, the fog pressing in around me, one thing became clear: whatever she was hiding, it wasn't over yet. The key, the glove, the photos, they were just the beginning. In my pocket, the small brass key, the leather glove, and the crumpled photo strip from the booth felt like anchors dragging me under. That photo, Mara laughing, her head tilted toward some stranger, his hand brushing hers, kept flashing behind my eyes. It wasn't imagination or paranoia anymore. It was real, captured in grainy black and white, a betrayal I couldn't unsee. When I unlocked our front door, the house was silent, save for the uneven ticking of the clocks Mara loved to collect. She wasn't home yet. Good. I needed space to think, to dig deeper before she walked in with her easy smiles and half-truths. The anger was still there, simmering, but now it was laced with something colder: determination. If she'd been lying to me, there had to be more evidence, something to explain how long this had been going on. I climbed the stairs to her studio, the one place she'd always kept sacred. The door was slightly ajar, a thin beam of moonlight cutting through the darkness. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the knob. This was her space, her refuge. Crossing that line felt wrong, but so did everything else tonight. I pushed the door open. The air smelled of paint and turpentine, a scent that once meant comfort but now turned my stomach. Her easel loomed in the corner, a canvas hidden beneath a cloth, but I ignored it. My focus was her desk, piles of sketchbooks, crumpled receipts, a cold mug of tea. I started with the drawers, my hands shaking as I sifted through her things. Guilt pricked at me, but I shoved it down. She'd forced this. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of old flyers, I found a small wooden box. It was carved with swirling patterns, a tiny lock glinting in the dim light. My breath hitched. The key from the carnival, I fumbled it out of my pocket and slid it into the lock. A soft click echoed in the quiet room. Inside, a bundle of letters waited, tied with a red ribbon. My chest tightened as I untied it and unfolded the first one. The handwriting was sharp, unfamiliar. Mara. Asterisk, I can't stop thinking about last night. The way you laughed, the way you looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. I know this is dangerous, but I don't care.
Meet me again tomorrow, same place.
I'll wait, asterisk.
The words hit like a punch.
I flipped through more, each letter a shard of glass.
Dates stretched back months, secret meetings, whispered promises. One from 2 weeks ago stopped me cold. Mara. Asterisk, I've made up my mind. I'm leaving town soon, and I want you to come with me.
We can start over, away from here, away from him.
Think about it.
You deserve more than this life, asterisk.
Leaving town. Leaving me.
The paper crumpled in my fist as the truth sank in. My legs gave out, and I sank into her chair, the letters spilling across the desk.
How had I missed this?
The late nights she'd called inspiration, the trips to galleries, all lies I'd swallowed because I trusted her. Because I loved her. A creak downstairs snapped me out of it. The front door opened, footsteps padding across the floor.
Mara.
My pulse raced. Part of me wanted to charge down there, shove the letters in her face, demand answers.
But I wasn't ready, not yet. I needed control, not chaos. I stuffed the letters back into the box, locked it, and pocketed the key. Then I stood, steadying myself against the desk.
Her voice floated up the stairs.
Ethan? You home?
Yeah, I called back, forcing my tone steady. I stepped out of the studio and descended, each step heavier than the last. She was in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun.
She looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong. Hey, you're early. How was the carnival? Fine, I said, leaning against the doorway. Fixed the carousel. That's my handyman.
She grinned, turning back to the soup.
I thought we could stay in tonight. Movies sound good?
Sure. The word tasted bitter. Sitting next to her, pretending, felt impossible, but I nodded anyway.
I had to play along until I figured out my next move.
She glanced at me again, her smile fading.
You okay? You look off.
Just tired, I lied.
Long day.
She bought it, or pretended to, and went back to cooking. I watched her, the woman I'd built my life around, now a stranger wearing her skin. The anger coiled tighter, but I kept it leashed.
For now.
Later, on the couch, the TV droned through some old film she'd picked.
I couldn't focus.
My mind was on the letters, on tea, on the life she'd been living behind my back. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and she reached for it, flipping it face down in one quick motion.
Who's that?
I asked, keeping my voice casual. Just a gallery friend, she said, too fast.
Nothing big. The lie hung there, thick and obvious. I didn't push. Not yet. But as the night wore on, my resolve hardened. I needed to know who he was, how far this went. And I'd find out soon.
The next morning, while she showered, I grabbed her phone. She changed the password, but I guessed it after a few tries, her old PIN with a twist. The messages opened, and there he was, Tia texts about meetings, about them.
The latest one, sent last night. Asterisk, meet me at the pier tomorrow. We need to talk about us, asterisk. Tomorrow.
I had a day to decide, follow her, confront her, or wait and watch. My thumb hovered over the screen, the words blurring. I put the phone back and slipped out of the room. Tomorrow, at the pier, I'd have my answers. And whatever came after, I'd face it head on. The fog hung heavy over the pier, wrapping it in a damp, gray shroud that dulled the world beyond. I stood near the entrance, my truck parked a few yards back, its engine still clicking as it cooled. My hands were stuffed in my jacket pockets, fingers brushing the edges of the crumpled photo strip I'd found, the one that had torn my life apart. Mara and him, laughing, touching, like I was nothing to her. The letters I'd dug out of her desk echoed in my head, each line slicing deeper.
Now, here I was, waiting. It was 7:55 p.m.
She'd show up soon, 8 o'clock, just like the text I'd seen said.
Meeting him. My jaw tightened, breath puffing out in short, angry bursts. Rage churned in my gut, mixed with a dull, throbbing hurt I couldn't shake. I'd given her everything, built my whole world around her, and she'd burned it down. I had to hear it from her lips, see her face when she realized I knew. Right on time, at 8 o'clock, she stepped onto the pier. Mara! Her red scarf danced in the breeze, dark hair catching the dim light. She looked jittery, her head swiveling as she scanned the shadows, hurrying toward the far end. My chest squeezed tight. She hadn't spotted me. Then, out of the fog, he appeared tall, lean, hood up against the damp. The guy from the photos. Mara didn't pause, she rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck, their hug a punch to my gut. I couldn't stay back anymore. My boots hit the wood hard as I stepped out. Mara! She froze, still tangled up with him, then whipped around. Her eyes went wide, face paling like she'd seen a ghost. Ethan? What are you doing here? The guy turned, his hood slipping enough to show that shark jaw and a smirk that made my blood boil. This your husband? He asked, like I was some stray dog wandering in. I ignored him, staring her down. Funny question, coming from you. I yanked the photo strip from my pocket and held it up, my hand shaking. Found this. And the letters. How long, Mara? Her mouth worked silently for a second, her gaze flicking to the pictures. The quiet stretched, suffocating, until he stepped up, planting himself between us. Look, man, whatever you think. Shut up, I barked, my voice slicing through the fog. This is between me and her. I moved closer, the pier creaking under me. Tell me, Mara. How long have you been lying? Her lips trembled, and for a split second, I thought she'd crack. Then her face hardened, a spark of defiance flaring in her eyes. You don't get it, Ethan. You never have. Don't get it? A bitter laugh ripped out of me. I get that you've been sneaking around, pulling away for months. I read the letters, every excuse, every lie. How long? She flinched, and he shifted, looking unsure. She didn't glance his way, her eyes glued to mine, something guilt, maybe flickering there. You went through my stuff? You left me no choice, I shot back, my voice climbing despite myself. You think I wanted to be here, watching you with him? After everything? He bristled, stepping in again. Back off, pal. She doesn't owe you. She's my wife, I roared, rounding on him. She owes me the truth. I jabbed a finger at him, then her. Tell me. Now. Mara grabbed my arm, yanking me back. Ethan, stop. It's not about him. It's about me, what I needed. You were never there, always working, always gone. I was alone. Alone. She'd said it before, in late-night arguments I'd dodged, promising we'd sort it out later. I hadn't heard her. So it's my fault? I asked, my voice breaking. You went behind my back because I wasn't enough? I didn't plan it, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks now. It just happened. How long? I demanded, quieter, the fire fading from me. She swallowed hard, wiping her face. 4 months. 4 months. A whole chunk of lies stuffed into a season. I stared at her, then at him, shifting like he wanted to bolt. 4 months, I echoed, the words bitter on my tongue. You've been building this behind my back, and I was too blind to see. Ethan, she reached out, but I stepped away, out of reach. No, I said, shaking my head. You don't get to talk your way out of this. You made your choice. I turned, the fog swallowing me as I headed back toward the entrance. Her voice called after me, thin and frantic, but I kept walking. Pain clotted me, sharp and empty, but there was something else too, a strange, cold clarity settling in. At the pier's edge, I pulled out my phone, her name glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered, then hit delete. Her contact blinked out, a clean break. I didn't know what was next, but I was done looking back. The dashboard clock flashed 1:17 a.m. I had no destination, just the need to escape.
The apartment we'd shared loomed in my thoughts, a place I wasn't ready to confront. Her scarf draped over the couch, her mug in the sink, the bed we'd shared, it all felt poison now, props in a charade I hadn't signed up for. I flicked the radio on, then off. Silence suited me better. It let the thoughts breathe, even if they burned. I found myself at a rundown 24-hour diner on the town's outskirts, its flickering lights buzzing faintly over the scent of stale coffee. Sliding into a booth by the window, I met the gaze of the waitress Bev, her name tag read, whose weary eyes didn't pry. She poured me a black coffee and left me be. I stared into the cup, steam twisting upward, my warped reflection staring back. Who was I now? A betrayed husband? A clueless idiot? The answer eluded me. On the table lay the photo strip, creased from my pocket, Mara and T, grinning in grainy black and white, heads tilted together. I'd kept it, though I couldn't say why. Evidence? Self-inflicted pain? My thumb brushed the edge before flipping it over. There, in her familiar cursive, was June 14. 4 months ago, almost exactly. My jaw clenched. That was the weekend I'd been away, sweating over a client's burst pipe 2 hours out of town. She'd texted me goodnight, said she missed me. A lie, even then. I pushed the photos aside and grabbed my phone. Her name was erased from my contacts, deleted in a fit of fury at the pier, but the evidence lingered in our message history. Scrolling back, I hunted for the turning point, the moment she'd drifted. It was there, subtle, clipped responses, vague plans, working late excuses that never held up. I'd believed her. That was on me. The diner door chimed, and a man stepped in, broad-shouldered, gray hoodie, hands buried in his pockets. My pulse spiked, mistaking him for T, but he turned, a stranger's face, and I slumped back, relieved. I wasn't ready for that rematch. Rage still smoldered beneath the hurt, and I didn't trust myself to contain it. Bev returned, topping off my coffee, her eyes lingering a beat too long. Rough night, she rasped, voice weathered by countless shifts. Something like that, I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. She gave a knowing nod. People don't come here this late for the cuisine. Stay as long as you need. Then she shuffled off, leaving me to stew. The coffee scalded my tongue, bitter and bracing, as I pondered my next move. Divorce was the logical path, legal papers, asset division, the dismantling of our life. It churned my stomach, but staying wasn't an option. She'd chosen, like I'd told her. Yet walking away felt too easy. My phone buzzed, jolting me. A text from Jake, my brother, *, you okay? Saw your truck at the pier earlier, *, my thumbs paused over the keys. Jake knew about the letters I'd found, the only one I'd confided in. He'd guess what seeing Mara there meant. I replied, *, not really. Can I crash at your place, *? His response was instant, *, doors open. Beer's cold, *. A faint smile tugged at my lips, fleeting. I tossed a 10 on the table for Bev and stepped into the thickened fog, the diner's glow fading behind me. The drive to Jake's blurred past, my mind stuck on the pier, Mara's tears, T's smug grin, her desperate grip on my arm like she still had claim to me. By the time I reached Jake's driveway, the pain had softened to a low hum, exhaustion settling in. He stood on the porch, beer in hand, Max the dog panting beside him. You look like hell, he said, passing me the bottle. Feel it too, I replied, taking a swig. The cold bite of it steadied me. Wanna talk? Not tonight, I said, shaking my head. He didn't push, just sat with me in the quiet, crickets filling the air. Mara was out of my phone but not my life, not yet. That would take more than a deleted number. For now, this sufficed, a beer, my brother, a temporary refuge. Tomorrow, I'd face the unraveling, how to break free, how to start over. And maybe, just maybe, how to ensure she felt the weight of her choices. The night at Jake's stretched long and restless, the spare bed springs digging into my back as I stared at the shadowed ceiling. My mind churned, Mara's glove caught in the carousel gears, those letters spilling her secrets, the photo strip of her and him, her tearful confession at the pier. Each image fueled a fire in me, not of violence, but of something sharper, a need to make her see what she'd broken. By dawn, exhaustion clung to me, but my resolve had hardened. I couldn't just walk away. Not yet. Jake was up when I trudged into the kitchen, the air thick with coffee and the faint char of toast. He pushed a mug my way, his grizzled face unreadable. "You look like hell," he said. "Got a plan?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah," I said, voice low. "I'm going back. One last thing to do." He squinted, concern flickering in his eyes. "Nothing stupid, right?" "No," I assured him. "Just something she'll remember." After choking down some toast, I drove to the apartment. The Victorian house loomed against the cliff, familiar yet foreign now. I didn't go inside, not yet. Instead, I headed to my workshop out back, the one place still mine. Tools lined the walls, a sanctuary of grease and metal. I set to work, the clang of hammer on steel drowning out the noise in my head. For 2 days, I poured myself into it, a small mechanical carousel, no bigger than a breadbox. I carved tiny figures, a man and woman hand in hand, a mechanic hunched over gears, a painter at her easel. Then the last one, a woman locked in an embrace with a shadowed stranger, while the mechanic stood apart, his head bowed. I rigged it to a wind-up motor, added a music box that played a slow, mournful tune. Every detail was deliberate, a story in miniature. When I finished, it spun perfectly, the figures circling their silent tale. I carried it inside that evening. Mara wasn't there, probably at her sister's, avoiding the wreckage. The apartment felt hollow, echoes of us lingering in the corners. I set the carousel on her desk, right where she'd see it, and tucked a note beside it, *, some things can't be fixed. *, then I grabbed my suitcase, packed the essentials, clothes, tools, a photo of us I couldn't bear to look at, and left. The door clicked shut, final. I didn't stick around to see her reaction, but I could imagine it. She'd come home, spot the carousel, wind it up out of curiosity. The figures would turn, the music would hum, and she'd piece it together, the life we'd built, the trust she'd shattered. No yelling, no fists, just a quiet mirror held up to her choices. She'd feel the weight of it, not from me, but from herself. That was enough. Back at Jake's, I dropped my bag by the couch. He glanced up from his beer, eyebrow raised. "Done?" "Done," I said, sinking into a chair. "She'll get the message." He grunted, a faint smirk tugging at his mouth. "Clever." I didn't smile back, but something loosened in my chest. The anger wasn't gone, but it wasn't choking me anymore. I'd fixed what I could, given her a truth she couldn't unsee, and now I was free to move on. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a new place, a new life. For tonight, though, I let the quiet settle, the carousel's tune still faintly spinning in my mind. The days after leaving the apartment blurred into a haze of numbness and quiet rage. I'd wake up on Jake's couch, the smell of stale beer and dog fur clinging to the air, and for a split second, I'd forget. Then it would hit me again, Mara's betrayal, the carousel I'd left on her desk, the life I'd walked away from. It was like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing, the pain sharp and familiar. But time, as it does, began to dull the edges. I found a small place of my own, a cramped studio above a hardware store, the kind of spot where the pipes groaned and the floors creaked, but it was mine. No ghosts lingered in the corners, no reminders of her laugh or the way she'd hum while painting. Just me and the hum of the town outside. Work kept me busy. The carnival's manager called me back to fix the Ferris wheel, and I threw myself into it, losing hours in the tangle of cables and gears. There was comfort in the predictability of machines, cause and effect, problem and solution. People were messier, their motives hidden like rusted bolts in hard-to-reach places. I didn't see Mara again, not directly. Jake mentioned she'd moved in with her sister, that she'd asked about me once, her voice small and hesitant. Part of me wanted to know if the carousel had hit her the way I'd intended, if she'd wound it up and watched our story spin in front of her. But I didn't ask. It didn't matter anymore. The point wasn't to see her suffer, it was to let her see what she'd broken, and to let myself go. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the cliffs, I drove out to the pier. The fog had lifted, leaving the air crisp and the sky streaked with pink and gold. I parked near the entrance and walked to the end, the same spot where I'd confronted her that night. The waves crashed below, steady and indifferent, as if nothing had changed. I pulled the photo strip from my wallet, the one I'd kept, despite everything. Mara and I, laughing in black and white, our faces close. I stared at it for a long moment, waiting for the familiar stab of anger. But it didn't come. Instead, there was a hollow ache, like pressing on a scar that had finally healed over. I tore the strip in half, then again, until it was nothing but scraps. Then I let the pieces fall into the water, watching them drift away on the tide. It wasn't forgiveness, maybe I'd never get there, but it was release. She was part of my past now, not my future. Back at the studio, I sat at the small table by the window, a half-finished clock spread out in front of me. The gears clicked into place under my hands, each piece locking with the next, a tiny universe of order. I wound it up, and it ticked to life, steady and sure. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. The road ahead was uncertain, new place, new routines, maybe even new people someday. But I'd survived the storm, and that was enough. I'd fix what I could, let go of what I couldn't, and keep moving forward, one tick at a time.